Hello and welcome to the FEZ Show. My name is Jack Giordmaina, and with me tonight I have the wonderful Jack Pickering. How are you?
I'm all right, mate. It's been a while since one of these. Well, at least it's been a dull summer and nothing's really happened. But yeah, ready to get back into it.
Nice. And then also with me, I've got Edward Hunter. How are you, buddy?
Oh, good. Thanks, Jack. Thanks for remembering me. It's always good to do this show, and like Pico's alluding to, there's been plenty of behind the scenes developments while we've been away, and can't wait to get into it. Season 10 beckons like the back of a postcard.
It does indeed. So we've got lots of things to talk about tonight. So first thing that we'll be focusing on is the calendar. Lots of changes been released today. So we're going to be looking at that in a moment. Then we'll be looking at the driver move. So what's happened in the off season since our last show. And then look ahead of testing. Testing kicks off next week. So we'll be me and Pico will be there. So we'll be talking everything testing as well. So boys, big show, big show, big show. We'll start with the calendar. Right, and I'll go to Ed on this, right? Because obviously great news, right? Shanghai, Tokyo, however you want to look at it, some good cities in there. We're obviously losing some as well, but the reasons have come out for that in Jakarta, Rome, and Cape Town. But for me, I don't know. This is the one thing for me that I feel is an issue. Is when we started this back in 2014, Formula E said we're a city with bringing races to the city. We're going to race on streets. That's our unique selling point. And I just feel like with every season, it's just that uniqueness is just dripping away, dripping away. And now I don't really know what Formula E's uniqueness and unique selling point is anymore.
That's an interesting point of view because I feel what's happened is sort of a more pragmatic response because there's been a lot of logistical issues with some of the races. Like we talking about Jakarta, for instance, where there's been a lot of because it was a lot of political stuff that got the event happen in the first place, and there's political stuff behind the scenes that's led to that being cancelled, which we were following from quite early on as well with the prime minister and whatever, but and Jack Pro and all those sorts of things and the scandals, but. Shanghai, for instance, we're racing on the Formula One, a modified version of Shanghai International, essentially. We've obviously got Rome is gone, and we got a TBD Italy. So obviously there was again logistical issues. But Tokyo, like you say, took a long time. But Tokyo is finally on the calendar. Sao Paulo, which also took a long time to get on the calendar, that's still there. Hyderabad, surprisingly, is still there, despite the fact that there was a little bit chaotic at times last year, especially when people got onto the track somehow. I still don't know exactly how that happened, but hopefully we don't see a repeat of that. And then you've got ones like Berlin, which is fairly easy to in terms of logistics because it's the old Tempelhof airfield, so it's not particularly used for any aeroplanes or anything during most of the year. Portland is coming back, which I know is going to be really unpopular with all of you guys because I know you hated that race. I think Portland's a lovely city, regardless of the kind of pack racing that it may or may not uncover with, of course, the attack charge and the pit stops coming in for this season. And, of course, we've got the season ending in London as it did last year, and I've conspicuously left out Saudi Arabia for obvious reasons because I don't really care about those races. But anyway, for the rest of it, I disagree. I think a lot of it is this has sort of had to happen to keep the show on the road. And maybe there's a little bit of the uniqueness of some of the city centre venues that formerly prided itself on are no longer there. I mean, how long has it been since we had like Paris on the calendar, for instance? That's another big one that City of Lights that's gone off the calendar. But I think at the end of the day, we still got Monaco, of course, as our sort of near France kind of round. So I think in the end of the day, you do have to be practical about these sorts of things and make sure at least there is a race on the calendar, even if it isn't exactly what I think we would have had a few years ago and Formula E was a bit newer and maybe had the logistics were a bit easier and we didn't have the situation that we do now in certain parts of the world where it's a bit different, a bit harder to race in some of these places.
Pico, so what are your thoughts on that? Because as I said, for me, I thought slightly losing its identity in a sense. I know you got some kind of contrasting views on that.
Yeah, so I completely agree in saying that yes, Formula E's ethos has always been we're taking the races to the people, we're going to the cities. But they never actually said streets. The only time they did is when they did electric street racing on the banners and stuff like that, and that is the only time that they've ever mentioned that it's exclusively streets. And so the fact that we've gone to Mexico since season 2,
I'm sure a gag has
that's
said I'm sure a gag has said many times in season 1 that this was, it was supposed to be a street racing series.
Yeah, this feels like a semantics argument, PK.
Yeah, no, but he didn't say streets. He said city. He said city, which doesn't necessarily mean, and that's why I'm so happy that we're going to Shanghai, because I think who did I mention? I think I mentioned it to, and this is going to take some people back. I think his name was Jerry Hughes. He was the team principal of Neo around like season 3 or season 4.
Yep. I remember Jerry Hughes very well.
And I said, yeah, I think Shanghai should probably be on the calendar because it's a city. It's not a street circuit, but it's a city, so it makes sense to go to the. To
it falls
races.
into that Mexico City bracket.
Exactly, and although, like as Ed alluded to, not the biggest fan of the Portland race, but we believe that's a stopgap for Los Angeles coming in potentially from season 11, and that's also when Jakarta is set to come back. The reason why we're not having it this year is because there is elections going on in June in Indonesia, so that is gone. Rome, I think that's a huge blow for Formula E, but the reason is because of that monster shunt that we had in the race this year, and the drivers were all up in arms about how unsafe the track was. I remember chatting to Sam Bird after the race saying we shouldn't come back here if that bump is not fixed. So, and that is exactly what's happened. So, yeah.
I'm sitting here laughing, right? I've got a story to tell, and I think it's great for the show. So we're texting, right? We're texting and I've just realized, and I've been laughing because I've just realized what you meant in the text. So Pico writes a text, Rome's obviously because of the crash that's happened, right? And he called it the monster shunt, and that's the reason why we're not going there. But I didn't really understand what a monster shunt was. So I replied in the group chat, thinking, isn't it quite bad Formula E's losing out to Formula E because of a monster shunt, not really even knowing what it was.
Sorry. What did you think it meant?
I was thinking, like, why has Rome got some like monster truck event going on in the same streets as Formula E, and they've decided actually we want this event over. That's how my brain worked when I read it. I was
okay.
I didn't actually comprehend what the monster shunt was, and then I was like,
it was
the Sam Bird one, the Sam
Bird, Edoardo, Mortara, that one, and it's the same bump that Nyck de Vries and Stoffel Van Dorn hit a few seasons ago as well. Anyways, that's what I meant by monster shunt, Jack. It's always good.
Thank goodness you didn't say monster mash.
Yeah, it would be somewhat topical. How many days are we out? 10, something like that. Happy Halloween, everyone.
It probably will be Halloween when this comes out. Yeah.
Probably.
No, I hope not. Right, we've got to get out before testing. I can't believe I'm just sitting here now and thinking, oh, that's what he meant. Oh. There's no monster truck event in Rome, and they've decided we'd rather have that than Formula E. Anyway.
The FEZ show, staying on the rails as it always does.
So bringing us back slightly. So I'm at Cape Town. Formula E, right? I've got the two issues. So the first issue I've got here, and then the second one we'll talk about in a second. Cape Town. Obviously, Cape Town's gone. Cape Town was really hard, Pico, for them to get. And for them, obviously, it's money issues, it seems, at the moment from the promoter for why it hasn't gone through. Now, I don't know. This would be really interesting going to testing. If we do get a chance to speak to Formula E, it'd be really interesting to find out more about this, because I think this infuriates me because it's happened before with Montreal. And I'm like, okay, we've worked so hard to get this thing, to go to Cape Town. Wow, Formula E's in South Africa and Cape Town. Great. Everyone's really looking forward to this race. It's built up and it's gone in one season. Now, did Formula E, I know you don't maybe know this, and this is something to maybe expand upon, but for me, like, do you think Formula E need to be more open with the calendar and what the contracts are? Because, they were once upon a time with Diriyah. Diriyah signed a 10-year contract. We know we're in Diriyah for like 10 years. Right, from when that was announced a couple of seasons ago, I think season 5 or season 6, right? So we're a couple of years into that. So for me, should they have announced if we're going to these sexy locations, as I like to call them, and I'll get back to that in a moment, into Cape Town, they're like, oh yeah, somewhere you'd want to go, somewhere you'd want to visit, right? Should Formula E say, look, we've only got a 1-year deal for Cape Town at this present moment, with an option to obviously extend if X happens? Should they be more open with us so we don't get our hopes up? Oh yes, Formula E's going to Cape Town, and then all of a sudden, oh, we're not going to Cape Town, and then we've got some boring substitute, or a not as good city involved, because that's my kind of issue with Portland, which I want to get onto next. But what do you think about that, Pico?
The thing is, we don't actually have a substitute for Cape Town. There is no race there, and I was actually very surprised that everyone's favourite super sub Marrakesh wasn't, because they brought in Marrakesh to replace Vancouver a couple of years ago. I had to go to Morocco in July. Thankfully, we had like the less hot weekend. It was only 33 degrees and not 43 degrees. Otherwise, I do think I would have died. Yeah, I think that they should absolutely be a bit more open about the contracts, because yeah. But the thing is, like, I think there is a reason why they haven't, and it's because I can't say that involves swearing. Stuff happens. And so yeah, and so like we were supposed to be in London for however many years at Battersea Park, and then the whole thing that Ed's got a great thing on the channel somewhere from many years ago, about
Basically, the locals
whole
didn't like it,
thing
basically,
there.
and
It happened with Putrajaya. Where else? It happened with Paris. Paris won. The reason why Paris has dropped off the calendar is because the government wanted Formula E to pay Paris 20 million a race to host a race there, instead of the other way around. And so yeah, that's why that fell off the calendar. And I do think it's a shame. I don't think we should ever lose the whole ethos of we are city street races and everything like that. But like, yeah, I think these things are like a necessary evil, and so it's understandable why they don't say about the contracts, because sometimes they can just be cut short.
yeah. And then my final point, then, Ed, I suppose, is this, and Pico, you can obviously weigh in on this too. Is okay, Portland, right? We're saying is a stopgap race. We lost New York because they're of these projects.
It was the terminal, wasn't it? They were doing some development work on the terminal.
So exactly.
And it's the ferry company that owns the land, essentially. Yeah.
So we lost New York, but New York, Paris, sexy names, right? I'm going back to that word, sexy names, and I know Pico's looking at me and laughing. It's hilarious. But they were like Tokyo, right? And possibly Shanghai in a sense, right? They make you basically stand up and pay attention. Formula E going here. It was like that with Cape Town. It was like that with Paris, like that with London, right? And I think that was a massive plus. And I think Formula E have worked so hard to try and get cities, that make you go, wow, they're racing here, right? And I think that's always been a plus point and a strong point for Formula E. But when we're going to, even Hyderabad for me, right? I think it's great that we're racing in India, but, and I know Hyderabad has a small motor racing, but it's not, New Delhi or, something that might make you stand up a bit more with India. For me, I just feel like when we go to places like Portland, like, nothing against Portland, right? And I have nothing against it, but when we go to New York, when we're thinking of going to LA and we're in Portland, it doesn't make me go, I don't know if I have that much, interest. If I was, it's the Portland Prix, or if I was a casual fan. If you're a casual fan, which Formula E is still 10 seasons in, I believe, still trying to attract, they're still trying to pull people in, right? With names like, come watch the Tokyo Prix. That will pull people in to see what the Tokyo Prix looks like, right? For sure. But no one's going, I want to check out the Portland Prix.
Well, I see what you mean. I think it's so important to have races in both of those. Like, I mean, I'm probably the wrong person to ask when it comes to sexiness, because I think you guys probably know more about it than I do. But but in terms of, I know exactly what you mean in terms of recognizable locations. But I think with Hyderabad, I think still the novelty of having FIA level motorsport in just India at all. But since F1 left, we haven't really had a sort of world championship level event go there until Hyderabad this year. So I think certainly. That still has a bit, even though Portland, like you say, is a bit of a different case because obviously it's it's the same, pretty much the same circuit they use for IndyCar racing as well. So there's a sense of Formula E, maybe not trying to compete with IndyCar, but it's sort of, there's a similar crowd that's coming in to watch it trackside, and there's a sort of sense of it's going to be compared to that a little bit. But I think I still think, like you say, like I said earlier, there's a sort of sense of Formula E has to be sort of practical and at least have a race somewhere. I remember in the early seasons, we were going on about how they were going for these destination cities and it was coming at the expense of sort of track design. So we'd end up with very tight, twisty tracks with lots of chicanes where people couldn't overtake each other. And I'm glad that that philosophy's slowly starting to change. We're seeing higher speed circuits, like, obviously though it's not on the calendar anymore, Cape Town was a good example of that, where it was pretty high speed throughout. I think Fenestraz set one of the fastest laps in Formula history in qualifying there. So yeah, and of course we've got other things like Monaco, we use the full layout now as well, and so I'm glad to see that the track design itself has started to change, but I agree, maybe there's still an element of us having to compromise based on basically just what Formula can get its hands on, what's available at the point in the year when they want to race in certain countries and stuff. So there's so much that goes into this in terms of money, in terms of sponsors, in terms of logistics, in terms of literally just getting the space free for the day and the often months beforehand to set everything up, and then a few weeks to take it all down afterwards as well. And obviously getting people on side locally for those races as well. So I think I'm always a bit hesitant to criticize, because I know Alberto Longo pretty much works his backside off to get this calendar as good as he can. So I agree. I think Portland, if the attack charge doesn't dramatically change the sort of race that we get, I think Portland is going to be another controversial one, sadly.
I do think attack charge will change Formula E massively this season. I must admit.
I hope so too. I agree with that, Jack.
I'm looking at the season 1 calendar, and you've got Buenos Aires there in Argentina. You've got Miami. I know it didn't work in Miami, but you just Moscow. Even Moscow. I know obviously now you wouldn't be in Russia, but like at the time Moscow.
Well, we're in Saudi Arabia, but anyway, I won't say anymore.
With London and with London and Monaco, like Beijing as well. Right around the Olympics Park, like in season 1 we had some really big cities, and I still think we have big cities, but I just when I look at most of that grid, maybe Puigdemont and Punta del Este, not in the capitals of their respective countries, there was a lot of big names in that calendar, and I just feel Formula E, they were pushing so hard for that in the early seasons, and then they added Paris and so forth onto it, that I don't want them to fall away from that. Pico.
Yeah, I think I've just about recovered from Ed Hunter calling us sexy. Yeah, I think yes. Some of the names, they don't attract as a huge amount as they did before. But the thing is, it is blimmin' difficult to shut down streets in certain areas. That's why for London we went with a park to start with, and now inside a conference centre. It's very it is very hard to shut down the streets. I am a little bit annoyed that we were chucked out of Miami for environmental reasons, and then 3 years later Formula One race in Miami. Answer on a postcard, please. But yeah, yes, we don't have some of the races don't have the same pizzazz, but the thing is, I think we still got to hold on to the ones that do give us pizzazz. And yeah, it's a shame that we've lost Rome,
and New York.
and I'm sure but the thing is, New York wasn't because of Formula E. Rome kind of was. So it's a shame that some of these races don't work out, but it is very hard to focus, to shut these streets and everything like that. It's crazy.
That I fully agree with. I do fully agree with that. It is hard, Formula E have got ambitions, and and so forth. And obviously they're working on this Los Angeles deal in America, which, you know, if you get that, then boom, a great city on the calendar, and that process is going. It's just, when you use the term stopgap, and you're just like, we're trying to find stopgap races, and then we get a great name and we lose a great name, and it's just, and then I go back to that argument, which I'm not going to go into now, but it's like, will Formula E ever have any classic tracks or classic cities that we've always been to? It probably will be Berlin at this rate, because everyone else and they're talking about outgrowing tracks in Rome, and then I look at London at the XL, and I'm like, well, how long until we outgrow that? And then what is the London E-Prix disappeared forever and ever? Because where else are you going to race? In London, for example. So then, you lose London. So I think when you go down that route that they're going down in Rome, it's a bit scary when I look at London, for example, because that is a huge draw for Formula E. But really and truly, the XL track, I love it to pieces, but there's not much they can do with it if the Formula E cars do eventually outgrow it.
They have talked a bit about extending that layout. Obviously, they had some construction work, which meant they had to shorten it a little bit this year. But there are discussions going on there, Jack. So I don't think it would be quite the end of the world if it started outgrowing the track. They could certainly make a few modifications. But yeah, you're right. There's certainly, for the time being, that is something to worry about.
Fingers crossed that it is on the cards. But let's talk drivers then, because this shocked me. Well, I don't know how much it shocked me. I think the Vries moving to Mahindra didn't shock me too much. I think when we were in London, Pico, and we saw him, we're like, he's here for one thing and one thing only. He's here to talk to people. He says he's in an interview that he just came to see friends, and then all of a sudden he bumped into Frederick Bertrand and asked him what he was doing. Surely he was there for a reason, right? He kind of must have known something was gonna. He didn't just pop in for no reason, right? But he must have gone a bit there, thinking a little bit of a scouting nose on there. But the one that shocked me going to Mahindra was Edoardo Mortara. And a lot of people, which I thought was crazy, Pico, at the time. It's kind of like when in football, when you have a great season, as Mortara did 2 seasons ago, when that Venturi was with the Grassi and fighting for a championship, and he could have easily been world champion. Obviously, it didn't go great last season. But the DS powertrain wasn't as powerful, you could say, and so forth. And Gunther managed to get his hand on it. Mortara wasn't his best season, but it's kind of like having a manager having one bad season in a football club, and then you just want to sack him and forget about all the good times you've had with him. Because that was kind of what people were saying on Twitter, and fans were saying for Mortara, get him gone out of Venturi or Maserati. But he's at Mahindra, and I just think the Vries and Mortara at Mahindra, wow, what a lineup! But then also, are they just going to be at the back of the grid this season? Because the Mahindra powertrain is not great, and nothing's changed apart from software this season.
Right, I'll try and answer those 5 questions. Yeah, I think no.
Sorry.
Yeah, no.
You know what I mean, right?
I'll reel them off. Yeah, completely. It was an open secret in London that Nyck was around looking for a seat, and the fact, but it was never Mahindra. It was either Andretti or Maserati were the 2 options, from what we believe, and Mahindra was never really on the table, even though they did have 1 spare seat at the time. But Mortara was absolutely shocking. I don't think anyone saw that coming, that they were going to leave, and I'm really hoping that she doesn't see this. But Maserati's director of communications, I did see on Insta, was on holiday in Spain when Mortara was announced as leaving. So yeah, I don't think it was too scheduled either. But he had to announce his departure there, because the following day he was announced to Mahindra alongside Nyck de Vries. And I mean, what was also shocking is that one of those drivers wasn't called Lucas de Grassi, who was now moved over to Abt. Obviously, we'll try and speak to Lucas next week, but from what we can see, it's purely because in either next season or from season 13, they're going to be Abt Cupra, but Cupra are the powertrain. So he's clearly moved over there to try and build that team, instead of what was his original retirement project, which was build that the Mahindra team up. I'm trying to think what the other questions were. But yeah, leaving
Don't ask me, I can't remember
Maserati
them.
was. There we go. There's the show. Maserati. I think they were kind of when they found out that they were losing Edo. I think it was a big bit of a shock, and they scrambled quite hard. Because I'm not saying that Jehan Daruvula isn't a good driver. He's had multiple F2 wins. He's been very competitive in F2, and he's been looking for a Formula E seat for a while. And I think in that Maserati team, learning from Max Gunter as well, who also came in from F2, middling time at F2. I reckon that he's got a good team leader there, and he will develop quite well. And I'm hoping that Edo and Nyck at Mahindra, that is what they need. That is what Mahindra need. They've got two solid drivers with experience fighting at the front. And so, yes, this season might be a little bit of a drag, but next season, hopefully they can push that team off. But yeah, I think Mahindra, I think it was Lucas's decision to leave, but that was a huge blow to them as well.
Yeah, I love, by the way, that you didn't understand what my questions were, but you make up your own answers in terms of. I didn't ask you anything about Grassi, but you just brought it in.
Because you asked about Mahindra, and he kind of exited stage left for it, so I interjected that as well.
He did, yeah. So we went round and round in circles, but it's all right. Good show. So Ed, I'll kind of go back to one question that Pico didn't quite answer. So De Vries Mortara, that Mahindra last season was shocking, right? And obviously the powertrain wasn't strong last season, so it shouldn't really be massively strong this season unless they make a massive gain in software. So do you think De Vries and Mortara are having to be patient here and play the long game and pray that next season's better? So season 11 is where they can actually start pushing for things, because season 10 is just going to be, when we spoke to Frederick Bertrand, he said, next season is going to be difficult too, but we'll try our best to move forward in ways that we can.
Well, it's certainly true that there's powertrain in the back of that Mahindra is probably not as efficient or as quick as I think Frederick Bertrand would have wanted it. But you got to remember as well, Frederick Bertrand joined that team at the start of season 9 pretty unexpectedly when Dilbagh Gill was left the team, and he sort of ended up taking the role literally, I think, a couple of months before the season started, I think. Or might have even been less than that, might have been a couple of weeks if I'm misremembering there. But yeah, so Bertrand has obviously had to spend a lot of season 9 trying to, change the team to sort of suit in a way that he thinks will be more efficient. He's got obviously all that experience at the FIA as well, and he's not really been an actual team principal, I think, before this point. So obviously it's a big change for him. And losing Lucas di Grassi to Abt, it's clear that Lucas di Grassi, as Pico sort of implied, I think, saw the improvements that Abt made throughout the season. Nico Müller was getting great point scoring finishes near the end of the season. So I think that would certainly have taken Lucas di Grassi's attention. Of course, he drove for that team, won the championship with them before, and their previous guys when they teamed up with Audi, as Abt Schaeffler, Audi Sport, of course. So I think Mahindra has certainly got a bit of a mountain to climb. They have at least got De Vries as a champion. They've got Mortara as a former championship runner-up and race winner as well. And it's interesting because those two fought each other for championships back in like season 7, season 8 and such. So it's really interesting to see who's going to get the upper hand, of course. But like you say, it was unexpected to see Edo leave Maserati, even though he had a bit of a bad season. But for both De Vries and Edo, it's Nyck and Edo, it's a reset year, isn't it? Because Nyck, of course, had his Formula 1 time that didn't really work out with AlphaTauri. Having the leave mid-season, he's bounced back immediately and gotten a seat. And Edo Mortara, of course, had difficulty where I think he only got 1 4th place. I think was his best result all season with Maserati last year, whereas his teammate was getting loads of podiums and winning a race. So there's certainly a lot of pressure on the both of them to at least get some good point scoring finishes, which I think they can still do, despite the Mahindra not being the best car out there. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see now that Abt has sort of not had to rush its entry for this season, how they compare to Mahindra this year throughout, whether Frederick Bertrand could get things together or whether Thomas Biermair and Abt Cupra are going to surge ahead then. But yeah, and as for Maserati, they've got even more changes because not just Daruvula coming in, but James Rossiter out, which is very interesting from my point of view.
Yeah, I think we'll talk about that in a second. We'll talk about Daruvula Pico very quickly. In terms of, I think if he was at Mahindra, right, it would have been a nice baptism of fire in terms of there wouldn't have been much pressure on him. The car wouldn't have been, great. We don't know, right? But if we're going from last season and then the hardware's not changing, there would have been less pressure. If he didn't score many points, it's kind of like a learning year for him. Whereas I think him in that Maserati, there's much more pressure on him because that car was fighting for podiums, right? So it's a DS powertrain, so you're expecting DS to make some steps forward, and therefore if DS and if we see Jean-Eric Verne and Stoffel Van Dorn and Max Gunther doing well and Daruvula not, I don't want to write him off already, but you could predict a short stay.
I don't want to think Maserati would be too harsh on him because obviously he is a rookie. Yes, I understand where you're coming from in terms of like if he was in the Mahindra, there wouldn't have been as much pressure on him as because he wouldn't be in a hugely front running car. But also at the same time, I think if he was in a Mahindra and he just jumped in and that was his first experience of Formula E, and I'm saying this as a huge Mahindra fan, as I am with all the teams, unbiased. It would be kind of like I think it'd be even harder for him. Whereas like if he's in a so-so car and he's somewhat competitive, then I think that'll actually make him better in the seat. But I'm sure he'll have a solid year. Is he the only rookie on the grid this year? I can't think of anyone else who is a rookie.
No,
But
I think he is. I think he
yeah.
is. Yeah.
I will say this now and then. Jehan Daruvula is my rookie of the year.
Bold prediction.
That is my goal. Yeah,
That is
bold prediction.
Bold prediction.
There we go. We only do bold stuff on this channel.
Only do absolutes. So we kind of talked about the Grassi, Ed, with Abt, and obviously it was a bit of a shock because he said it was kind of a project. He knew the season was going to be great. But Andretti and Nato, like we thought it was really harsh, really Nato losing that Nissan seat, and it seems like he's gotten to Andretti, so it feels like vindication in a way. I feel for Nato because he didn't deserve to be dropped from Nissan. He definitely deserved to be on the grid and was doing some great performances towards the end of the season. So I just felt he deserved the seat, and I'm delighted that he's on the grid.
Yeah, I think Norman and his manager Tiago Monteiro, of course, the former Formula One driver, have done a really good job in terms of putting his name out there. Andretti have clearly taken notice because we all thought Felipe Drugovich was going to be the preferred choice for Andretti. He'd done really well in testing with Maserati, but of course he's taking the Nyck de Vries route. The allure of Formula One is a little bit too strong. There's a role with Aston Martin, I think, a reserve driver role that he's quite keen on getting himself into. And I think he thinks that might lead to a race seat, depending on what happens with Lance Stroll, of course. I think I wouldn't hold my hopes out for that one too long, if I'm being honest, with Lance Stroll being in his own dad's team. But I think regardless, it's great for Norman. He's really, like you say, he always seems to end the seasons well. And it's frustrating from his point of view because Nissan was effectively a new team with obviously sort of they've been becoming a new entity after sort of buying up EDAMS, essentially, Nissan. So Norman had to sort of not only join this new team but adapt to it beginning of season 9. And clearly Fenestraz had a much stronger start to the year, and he's quite rightly getting another go. And Norman was put out on the cold because Oliver Rowland became available, and now Jake Dennis really needed. There's so many times we heard over the radio, "Where is Andre in this race?" And he would be like 9 positions behind him. So it's great to see Norman Nato, who should fingers crossed, be a little bit more competitive in season 10, finally getting to do 2 years in a row rather than just the 1 year and then being benched on the sidelines. I think Andretti made a very, very shrewd choice, and it should be able to vastly improve their point score in the team's championship. So we'll have to see how things work out, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see more podiums from Norman Nato, given that the hardware in that Porsche powertrain is going to be the same. So we'll be interested to see how it works out, but I expect Norman to be a very, very solid number 2.
Yeah, I'm absolutely delighted that Nato's back on the grid. But I want to talk about testing, because something that came up a couple of days ago, which kind of confused me a little bit. And if I was a Formula E driver, one of the drivers on the grid, I don't know if I'd be too happy about this. Is that within the 3 days of testing that we've got this season, a rookie driver has to be in. So we've already seen like Jack Aitken's been confirmed as the rookie driver for Envision Racing. So if you're Robin Frijns, now obviously Robin Frijns, you could argue, knows the Envision, but he hasn't driven the Gen 3 Envision. So he might prefer to have the 3 days of, driving that car and getting used to it. But he's going to lose some time to have a rookie driver in that car, where he doesn't get that 3 days of practice, which I think for me, a rookie tester in preseason testing, which is such a vital component for the drivers and the teams to get to grips for the season. Obviously, we got a big leeway into January from October to for the start of the season, Pico. I just thought, for me, I don't know, didn't quite sit quite right with me.
Yeah, this doesn't happen in any other series. In the preseason testing, you get rookie drivers come in. I think how they did it last year, because there was this whole thing, because it was around Valencia when they announced that there needed to be 2 practice sessions over the course of the season where rookie drivers had to come in, and everyone hated that, and so they reverted it to a test day in Berlin on the Monday after the Berlin E-Prix, and a rookie free practice session in Rome. And honestly, I think that was perfect. I think that worked fantastically. And I think it's really disappointing. I mean, like, we've already had a chat about Jehan Daruvula, who is getting into a Formula E car. Well, not for the first time, because he did the rookie test in Berlin. He didn't go out in the Rome free practice because that was when Mahindra had like a total power problem or something. I can't remember what it was, but I know that it affected both the Mahindras and the Abts in not just the rookie free practice session, but also free practice 1 in Rome. And so, yeah, I think how they did it last year with the full day and then a practice session afterwards, perfect. There's no need to put rookies in for the. I think for preseason testing, I think for Envision, I think it's a solid idea, because there will not be a time to put a rookie in before Berlin when both of your drivers are contractually obliged to prioritize WEC over Formula E, which means that they have to put 2 drivers in for at least Berlin 1, because I believe the Spa, I think I'm not sure if it's 4 or 6 hours of Spa, but the WEC race that happens on the Saturday. So actually, if Envision really wanted to, they could get Seb and Robin over the border from France to Germany. Admittedly, it's East Germany, not the east of Germany. So it's harder to get to. But weirdly, not
Well,
weirdly,
this thing's called planes. Brussels to Berlin.
Yeah. The thing is, it makes sense to put Jack Aitken in because he is their reserve driver. It's just that he's kind of already busy on that weekend because he's doing IMSA. So it's gonna be interesting.
Alice Powell will
what
definitely
happens
drive
there.
that weekend.
I really want Alice Powell to drive, mainly
Alice
because pride of Oxfordshire, Alice Powell. She's from Chipping Norton, which is about 20 minutes down the road from me. Love to have her on. But yeah, I think, yeah. So in terms of that, it makes sense. But in terms of the whole thing, just putting them in for preseason testing, it does not make sense to me at all.
I'm sure the team principals will tell us, oh yeah, it does make sense. But at the moment, I can't see a reason why it would, taking away track time from your main drivers. So Ed, my main question though about this testing, and this is my whole problem with the 2-year cycle. I know it saves money, but are we expecting to see the same thing? Like, am I going to Valencia? Me and Pico going to Valencia to see a repeat of what happened pretty much last season, where DS were really strong, and then we go to the first race in Mexico, and all of a sudden Porsche and Andretti are the front runners, or or are we expecting there to be at least some change?
Well, we did see Jaguar really improve as the season went on, for instance, so I wouldn't expect it to be a carbon copy, certainly. But one thing I do want to say is that there are apparently going to be 2 race simulations that will take place, and that's going to be where they're going to start using the fast charging in a pair of sort of mock races, essentially. And the rookie drivers won't be allowed to take part in that, apart from Jehan Daruvula, who, of course, is, a rookie this season. So, of course, he'll be allowed to take part. And I know the race released an article, I think, last week that had names of some of the drivers. Of course, there's some familiar names like Zane Maloney from F2, Adrian Tombe from DTM, Jörn Urlacher is going to drive for Maserati, Luca Giotto and Victor Martens are going to test for Nissan. Jordan King is going to test with Mahindra again. An interesting one, Gabriel Gilkova is going to test for Porsche, and she's a LMP2 and LMP3, and GD4 driver. And I thought that's really interesting. Great to see. We're talking about Alice Powell, but great to see another young lady in motorsport getting a chance to drive these Gen 3 Formula E cars, because it always feels like they don't get that many opportunities. We did have that all-women Gen 2 test like 5 years ago now in Diriyah, but since then it sort of feels like we haven't had many get the promotion, apart from maybe Alice Powell, and even then she's always seems to get overlooked. So like Pico says, if Buemi and Friens aren't available, then she would be an absolutely brilliant choice to put in the car, and she's been doing all the simulator testing as well, as is Gabriel Gilkova, actually, from what Fleur Modelling has been saying. So yeah, I'm looking forward to see how they get on, as well as all the regulars, of course. Anyway, I'm sorry I didn't answer your question at all, did I?
No, I think you did. I think you said it was going to be potentially a bit different, and potentially maybe seeing Jaguar, who have been strong towards the end of the season, maybe, as the package got better.
Because there were so many teething troubles and parts running out, weren't there, beginning of Gen 3, so hopefully we're not going to see quite as much.
It would be interesting, though, to see if, let's say we do go to Valencia and Jaguar envision at the top 2, and Andretti and Porsche close behind, and you're in for a very similar season. And that's the kind of issue with the 2-year cycle, is that you could be having 2 identical seasons. Therefore, if you're at the front in the first season, then you want to be in one of those cars in the second season, because good chance again you're going to be fighting for the title. And if you're in a bad car, a bit like Oliver Rowland from Mahindra, who's like, I ain't sticking around, right? The Nissan's pretty half decent again, like can fight at some races. I'll go there and see what they do next season. But we'll see.
Yeah, and also lap times aren't going to tell us efficiency as well, which is going to be such a big part of this season, especially with the fast charging as well.
But that's the only counterplay, I suppose, for this season is how that works out. And if teams like Neo, for example, and Dan Ticktum, if efficiency isn't as important as it once used to be, I suppose it would be important, but teams will still use a charge for their pit stop for an undercut or an overcut potentially. So, and I think we'll see that type of racing terminology turn up again in Formula E, as we do in Formula 1, because that's the only way I can see it working. And we don't have an efficiency fastest lap, as in like a extra point. It was supposed to be once upon a time an extra point for efficiency, but that's still an extra point for fastest lap. So we'll see how that goes. So boys, we won't be doing a you want to say something? Well,
yeah,
go on,
no,
then, before
I will
I do my
just
next
say,
bit.
yeah, no. If they do give an extra point for efficiency, we're just going to see more of what we saw in Portland. So
Yes.
I'd rather that they don't do that. That's just all I wanted to say, just off the top of my head.
Yeah, I suppose that's a good point. Well made. But we normally end these shows, but we haven't had testing, right? So we can't say like who's going to be world champion. It's too early for that. That comes in the next one, when testing's over. So who is going to top? Who's going to be the team to beat? Who's going to set the pace in this irrelevant test, as Mr. Pickering calls us? But I don't think it is as irrelevant as it is anymore, because if we're going to Shanghai, track. If we're going to Mexico, it's on a racetrack. If we're going to Portland, it's on a racetrack. Maybe the Valencia tests aren't as Monaco, kind of like a race circuit, pretty much. Maybe
I mean, you did see what happened last year. We all saw what happened last year. Yeah.
Maybe
30 best was Dennis in 13th, and they finished one. 1, 2,
maybe
4,
maybe
something.
maybe this season with the more racetracks, it's not as relevant as we think. But who do you think is going to be quick in testing? Do you think it's going to be status quo? Do you think someone's going to shock us? Mr. Pickering, go first.
I think. You know what? I think I'm just going to go with Gunter because he is a Valencia specialist. He is a Valencia specialist. He did it last year. He did it when he was in the BMW. So yeah, but this is just for Valencia. It's just for Valencia. I'm stealing your man, Jack. I'm going Max Gunter.
I'm surprised there's not a race in Valencia, to be honest with you. We should have done round
Yeah,
one.
no,
Valencia.
yeah,
we should have just
I mean,
done round one on that.
That would have been
weekend after
another
testing.
option. That would have been another option. Valencia.
Might as well. We've got street circuits. It's not far from the city. Might as well. Ed.
Yeah.
Interestingly, when they did the mock race, I think the McLarens did really, really well, and we know the Nissans also had really, really good one-lap pace as well near the back end of the season. So I'm going to go. Probably Sasha Fenestras is going to be one of your ones to watch, but I think Ollie Rowland and Jake Hughes as well. I think Sam Bird's still going to take a bit of time to bed in to McLaren, but I've said that before about Sam Burden, and he's won at Jaguar first time out and stuff like that, so could very well be wrong. But I think Nissan powertrain cars are going to be pretty good at Valencia.
I'm fuming with Pico. He picked my man. I was going to say Max Gunther.
Sorry.
Because, he was my champion last season.
You're allowed to pick the same person as me. You're allowed to pick the same person as me.
Yeah, I am, and I will, because I said to Max at the end of London, I said, "You let me down this season, mate. I lost my bet. I lost my bet." And he said, "Don't worry, next season I'll try my best."
Yeah.
So I'm going to bring up in Valencia, by the way, when I interview him. I'm going to be like, "Mate, so World Championship this year. If I put a tenner on, you think I'm going to make some money? You better say yes."
In MotoGP, Maverick Vinales is always the testing champion, and I feel like in Formula E, Max Gunter is the testing champion.
But Maverick Vinales is good, though. I don't know. I haven't followed MotoGP. I've got lost in the way. Marc Marquez is not what he once was, but he's crashing every 5 seconds.
That's the bike more than anything. Next year he's on a different bike and he's going to wipe the floor with everyone. But that's another conversation. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, interesting. It's a different sport that we've got into on the FEZ show.
He's leaving Honda. He's going to Grassini.
Wow.
It's crazy.
I haven't. Might watch MotoGP.
Genuinely, MotoGP is like, and this is going to be controversial. Me saying this on this show. MotoGP is my favorite motorsport.
I thought you were going to say Moto E was your favourite.
I don't really follow.
Right. The FEZ show seems to have come to its natural conclusion then. Before we start...
What, you mean
talking about other
with a whimper and not with a bang?
Oh yeah, we're talking about MotoGP now, so I don't know. We must be bored of Formula E.
Well, you are.
So me and Pico will be in Valencia, sunning it up. In the warm weather. It's getting cold in the UK. I think both of us are looking forward to the high 20s in Valencia next week. We will be there covering day-by-day actions. Testing starts on Tuesday. Media day Thursday, so there'll be lots of content hopefully Thursday coming your way in the future. But testing is on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. So lots and lots of things to look forward to on the FEZ show. Pico's trying to show me something. Yeah, the temperature 23, 24, 26 degrees. It's going to be a great one. It's going to be great. We're going to be, I don't know. We're going to be having a great time, and fingers crossed we'll be able to provide you with tons and tons and tons of content through the week. Thank you so much, Pico and Ed, for joining me today.
Pleasure.
Have fun in the pool, guys.
Yeah, we will. Can't wait. Can't wait to get into that swimming pool Monday. We're flying out Sunday. Jump in that swimming pool Monday morning. Boom, that's where I'll be for the whole day. Cannot wait. We will see you in Valencia, in sunny climate. Ciao for now.